Okay, welcome to Exercise 13-1. I want to demo completion of this exercise. So if you turn to your book on page 439, it's a create a data list application. So we'll go ahead and step one says to go ahead and open up the starter code. So we'll I'm going to open up a website since I haven't opened this yet. Go to my book directory, Murach. Under that, ASP.NET 4.5 exercises, and grab exercise 13 invoice line items. And the objective of this exercise is to add to the existing page. So we're going to open up the default page. There's only one of them. We're going to add, let me go to my split view, the drop-down list box to select an invoice, and then a control to display the line items from that invoice. So step 2 on page 439, they want us to add that label to the form that basically says choose an invoice. So let's go grab a label control from our toolbox and drag that over there. And then we're going to call that, or we're going to display choose an invoice. So I'm looking at page, I'm doing step 2, but I'm looking at the final product on page 39 and letting that guide me as well. Then they say they want us to add a non-breaking space, which sounds really fancy, but all they're really telling us to do is hit space. Put a space between the label and then the next control. You will notice up in the code window in the HTML tag markup, what it did is it put more than just a white space. It actually put ampersand NBSP. So that's where that non-breaking space comes from, and that's so that space will be retained and it won't be ignored as just regular white space. It actually is a space. Finally, they say, let's add a drop-down list. So where am I at? Step, middle of step 2. So we'll go grab a drop-down list and drag that on here. And they want us to then use the Smart Tag menu that pops up automatically and set up a data source to basically pull back the invoices to be displayed, the invoice numbers. And that's what step 3 says. It says connected to the Halloween.mdf file that's already in our app data folder in our project, and include the invoice number from the invoices table. Oh, but not all the invoices, just the ones that are over 300. So we'll have to set the where clause to do that. So let's do that. Let's choose a data source, and we'll create a new data source. What are we connecting to? We're connected to our SQL database. We could give it a name if we wanted to. What connection do we want to? Our application Visual Studio knows that we already have that MDF file in that special app _ directory, so it's already generating a connection string to make a connection to that. So I'll go ahead and take advantage of that. Next, I'll go and then choose which table I'd like to connect to, or what data I want to pull back from that database. In this case, it's going to be a very simple. We just want all the invoices, so we'll go to the invoice table. We'll see we want the invoice number. Notice my select statement down here. It's basically generating SQL for me. If I'm not a huge fan of SQL, I'm using this wizard to generate that for me. If I wanted to type it myself, I had some advanced SQL statement, I certainly could say specify my own, hit next, and then type in the SQL statement. But I'll use the wizard. Now, here's the tricky part. They want only grab invoices greater than 300. So I'll click on my where clause in this wizard, and then this will set up a where clause for me. Now, what you'll notice is it will say, hey, where are you getting the data from? I'm not just typing in, or first, which column am I using in conjunction with this where clause? So we're saying where the total is greater than 300. Now, where is the data coming from? Is it got all these choices? Is it coming from a root in the URL? Is it coming from a session variable? Is it up in my query string? Is it a query string parameter? Is it stored in the profile database? Is it somewhere on my form? Is it in a cookie? Maybe it's on another control on my form. But in this case, we're keeping it simple. It's none of these. So we're going to check none. That's what step 3 says. Check none, or select none. That way we can just type in a value. So we're saying over 300. So we'll add that parameter to our SQL statement, say OK, and notice what it did for us. It set up a parameter called @total. That's what it did down here, and it's going to pass that number 300 in there for us. So we'll say next. We'll test out our query and say OK, there's that 300. And it should bring back a bunch of invoices, all the ones where the subtotal, or the total, excuse me, is greater than 300. That looks valid, so we'll say finish. Say OK to the wizard. And now we have that drop-down list bringing back all those invoices. They also mentioned that we want to enable auto postback. And the reason we want to do that is so that whenever someone makes a different selection, we will resubmit the whole form and get new data. So that was the end of step 3. On step 4, we finished the wizard, which we just did. Step 5, we're going to change the name of the drop-down list to DDL invoice. So here's an interesting tidbit. They're telling me to change the name of this control. So we'll come over here and we'll look for name, but it's really not name. It's the programmatic name. The actual, what they really want us to do is change the ID, which is the programmatic name of the control. So we'll come down here and we'll change this to DDL invoice, and they're using Hungarian notation with that DDL for a drop-down list. And then they said set the auto post back to true, which I already did. I did it here in the little smart menu, but you could have also come here to the properties and done it, right? So come down here to auto post back and just double click to toggle it. So now it's true. Step 6, we want a second SQL data source. So now we're going to start, so we're finished with this guy here. We're now going to add another SQL data source and for the other set of data that we want to display, which is the line item from the invoice. So let me go to my data group of controls and find SQL data source, and we'll drag that onto the page. Now the first one got created when I set up the drop-down list using that wizard, but you don't have to, there's again multiple ways to do things. So this got created from a wizard here. Oh, didn't mean to do that. But this guy just drug onto the page. And now I will configure him using hit smart menu. And let's see, they say add it to the configure it, so it uses the connection string that we already created earlier. So we'll just reuse that connection string. Because we're connecting to the same database, right? What do we want to pull back? We want the line items, so things that people have ordered. And we don't want all of them. Again, we want to show the product ID, unit price, quantity, and extension. I'm looking at step 6 here, which columns we want to be displayed. And we only want, so right now it's going to grab all of them, but I want to change this. I want to add a where clause that says only grab the ones from the invoice number that was chosen from the drop-down list. So I'm going to use the where clause to say go find invoice numbers that are only equal to where am I getting my data from this time. This time, instead of typing it in, I'm going to get it from another control on the page. Which control? The drop-down list box. And I'm going to automatically get the selected value, which is exactly what I want. So whatever invoice number they choose, I'm now going to make that a parameter to my where clause. So I'll say OK to that. And indeed, there's my where clause with that parameter. We could test that out. We have to give it, when we test this out, because we didn't specify a value, we have to give it a test value. So we'll just put in there some number. Hopefully there's an invoice 1000. And there is. Looks copacetic, so I'll finish that. And now we have a configured second SQL data source that pulls down our line items. So that's step 6 on page 440. Step 7, add a data list control to the form. So we need a control that's actually going to display the results of this SQL data source. So we'll go again to our toolbox under data and look for data list. Drag that onto the page. And we're going to say, oh, let's see, step 8 or let's make this connected to our SQL data source that we just set up, SQL data source 2. Probably should have gave them better names, but it's only a couple, so it's not that big of a deal. So actually, at the end of step 7, they say, hey, let's take a look at what we got so far. So let's do that. Let's run this guy. Oh, I got a build error. I love a build error. So let's not do that. Let's see what the problem is. Double click on that first error, and it's complaining that I don't have a definition for selected index changed. So that's unusual. Let's look up here and see if we can spot something. Usually when the wizard generates things for you, it's pretty good about getting everything right. I didn't actually go up and change any code. I do see here that my onSelected index change, that's an event, and it's saying it's tied to this method, but that method hasn't been defined. And I think what's going on here is I did this earlier in a first attempt at recording this, and so it's looking for this method that I went and deleted during my first attempt. So let me just unwire that. Basically, I'm going to say, you know, we're not ready to do this bit of code, so let me get rid of that association if I can get on there. Actually, let me try maybe a refresh schema might do that for me. So, okay, that build. No, okay, that's all right. Let's go in there and find that line of code again. So I just double click the arrow to jump me to the line of code because I got lost for a second there. And since this is the one it's complaining about, down here, we'll delete it up here and try another build. Yeah, now we're good. And again, that was because I did it once and then deleted everything and started over. If you're doing this from scratch, you shouldn't get it. I didn't get it the first time I did it from scratch. All right, now let's run this guy. And that's what we have so far. So at the end of step 7 on page 440, we've got our drop-down list box that's retrieving invoices greater than 300 with totals greater than 300. And notice every time I pick a different invoice, the line items change. So that auto postback's working. We're getting different lines of data depending on what invoice we choose. And the data list is also displaying the line items using that data list control. But the next couple steps are going to fix the display. It's not pretty, right? We want it to be a little, give it a little more formatting so that it's more aesthetically pleasing. So that's on step 8. We start that process. Let's go back. Step 8 says, hey, let's edit the templates of that data list so that we can have greater control over the data display. And so what they're talking about there is certain controls, and data list is one of these controls, have a feature called templating, where you can say, hey, I want to edit the templates. Basically, you know, I want to change the default display. Right now, the default is the label of the column followed by the value of the column. Well, we don't like that, so we're going to edit the template. And there's many templates we can choose from. There's a header template, there's a footer template, there's an item template, there's an alternating item template, which is for every other item. If you want to do something like zebra striping or something like that. So we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to edit the item template. So let's choose that. That's what they're saying there at the end of or in the middle of step 8. And once we say display the item template, notice it changes. In fact, let's see, let's pick a different one just so we can see. There's nothing specified for alternated items yet, so that's why that's empty. The header template, there's nothing specified there. So the only one that's even filled out by default right now is the item template. So we're going to change that. We're going to say, you know what, we don't want to show just all 4 columns and values one after the other like that. What we want to do, looking at step 9, is they're saying, hey, go insert a table. At the end of step 8, they have us insert a table that has a certain width. Then they set the width of each column. Then we set some text alignments. And then on step 10, we actually move the labels into the 4 columns. And actually, step 10 says move the labels, but really I think what they're saying is they want us to move the values, right? Because on each item, we want to display the value. And then the labels we're going to put up in the header. So let's do that. Let's go in here and let's insert a table. So I'll say table, insert. And what they say, 1 row, 4 columns. And they want the width to be 100 pixels. Or actually, the whole table is going to be 400. And then each column will be each column will be 100. So let's see, that looks okay for now. We'll say okay to that. So here we've got 4 columns and a whole table. Now what else do we want to do? We want to move each one of these. Again, they said labels, but I'm pretty sure they mean values. So let's take this value, stick it here, and take this guy and put it here. this guy. I'm just copy and pasting. Control X, Control V, and line them up in the. Oops, did I get that one right? So if I'm getting them right, notice up here in my HTML markup, I should have my table row, table element, and I should be putting each one of these in a separate element, right, to separate them. And now that I'm highlighting down here, I can see that I've actually stuck them all in the same one. That's not quite right. So sometimes if the designer's not doing exactly what I want because I've got fat fingers, I'll just go up to the code window and make these changes and make sure I put them in the right spot. So I want this actually to be here, and I want this one to be. Code window can give you a bit finer control over where you're putting things. And so the last one, whoops, where did my last one go? I've got product ID, unit price, quantity, and notice this all got generated for me when I put the configured the wizard. But this is the actual code that gets put in there. So it uses this eval function and these little code snippets. That's what the yellow. The angle bracket % sign is doing. It's a code snippet, goes out and evaluates this and brings it back as HTML. So let's see what we got. We've got our product ID, a unit price, our quantity, and the last one is extension. Where did extension go? I don't know why. Oh, it's in there somewhere. Let's find it up in our code window. There it is. Let's go grab this guy. Pull that out and put this guy down here in that. So now we have it, each one of these guys in a column, and what do they want me to make sure I set the widths and the alignment. So alright, so let's go and add style. We'll set the width equal to 400 pixels, no, 100 pixels, and they want us to do an alignment, so I'll use text align because I want the text to be aligned, and I think they said that first one is going to be, let's see, I'm looking at step 9, we're going to right align the second, third, and fourth columns, and I guess left align, or okay, just those, we're not left aligning the first one, okay, whatever, we'll left align the first one anyway, since I started typing on the first one. And then down here we'll do the same or something similar. Actually, I just did the whole row. I didn't mean to do the whole row, right? I want to do each column. I pull that out, put that in this guy, and then we want to do this one, but this time we want this one to be right aligned, and then we want this guy to be right aligned. And we want the last one to be right aligned. Alright, so I just added a little, and I could have done a separate cascading style sheet. I'm kind of cheating a bit and just putting the whole, and actually it probably would have been better, instead of repeating this over and over again for these three, I should have done a cascading style sheet and just specified it once, but you get the idea. Alright, so there's my my width set for each column, and I aligned this one left and aligned these right. What else do we want to do? Move the labels. So we put and the reason they're calling them labels is, they're actually label controls that are then bound. This is data binding to the different controls. So they are actually labeled. That's why the book uses the term label, but it's really the value that's being moved there. Now the next step on step 11 is where we actually go and grab. We're going to go set up the. Actually, step 11 they have us applying the currency format to which column? The unit price. All right, so let's do that. So we're going into our template editing, and we're going to take the unit price, and we're going to edit that, and we're going to say, you know what? Not only do I want you to display the unit price, but I also want you to display it as currency. And so now, all this is going to do, by the way, it sounds like a real fancy wizard, but it's going to change where we had eval unit price to eval unit price, comma, quote, fancy bracket, 0, colon, C, fancy bracket. Watch. So I'll say OK to that, click here, and that's all it did up here. Just, it's applying a formatting to that, to the value that comes back from that. So now when we run this, you'll see it'll have a $sign and 2 decimals for the unit price. All right, so that was step 11. Step 12, let's add a header. So right now we don't have a header. If I run this, you'll see there's all the data here, but there's no. I left the labels up here, so we want to change that to more of a header format. So let's go back and do that. To do that, I'm going to edit the templates one more time, but this time not the item template, but the header template. And before I do that, let me go grab these so I don't have to retype them. And I'll cut those out of there. We don't want them every item. We want them in the header. So then we'll switch to the header template. And now in the header template, I'm going to put those values, but not like that, right? We want another table. So let's go ahead and insert a table. And again, with the 1 rows and 4 columns, and we'll make it 400 pixels. So the same, same width as the one below it. And then we'll again grab each one of these guys and put them in each one of those columns. I'm trying to make sure I get in each one of those. I missed just one. All right, so let's put this guy here. Just moving them over, right? And then there's a column right there. There we go, got it. Okay. So now, and then get rid of these extra. And I got one little extra colon in there. All right, good. Let's run that, see what that looks like. So now we should have our table with the headers and then the columns. Notice they don't line up. I didn't set my 100, or actually they're right aligned, so they do line up. They're just, these guys are, I was going to go set the width to see if I could fix that. And you can play with the format, you know what I mean? In fact, the final step here, step 13 to 14, has us displaying the look, and they use the auto format command, which is my favorite, right? So let's go and do that. We'll come in here and say, okay, that looks great, but really let's end display template editing, and now let's just format the whole list. So it's auto format, and we'll give it something, let's go brown sugar. I like the zebra striping, so we'll go with sand and sky. And now when we run this, we get a much more polished look. And as we change our invoice numbers, we get different data. So that's it. That's exercise 13.1. Hopefully that helped. Thanks.